This is Andrew with Cedar Hill for Beautiful Spaces. This is Cedar Hill in Charleston, West Virginia. Project we did. It's a boutique hotel / Airbnb at the moment. You're welcome to come stay with us and check this out. This is the floors. This is an episode we did on the floors, which we used iron oxides, ebony, and copper salts to do this. This is what the finished product looks like. We actually started with this section right here because everything else had been nicely burnished and they just stopped for some reason, and this was all funky as far as texture and color, and we were afraid when we put epoxy down it wouldn't look that good, and so we went on this kind of journey of staining it and staining the whole floor, and this is what we came up with. We're very happy with how it turned out, and we're going to show you how to do it. But before we do, this is the other unit. We were so happy with the first unit, we decided to do it in our second unit also, and we're happy with how it turned out there. So this is what the floor looked like when we began. It's burnished with a steel trowel. That's why you get these funky marks, these kind of in an arc. This is just when they finish concrete. That's the way they make it smooth at the very end. Depresses the water and or pulls up the water and depresses the aggregate. And yeah, there's another shot. We're going to show you how to use these copper salts. This is the first. First we'll use the iron oxide salts actually. So we started by just getting some random steel we had lying around, some steel tubing. This is 2-inch steel tubing. We added some vinegar to it. The vinegar corrodes the steel, of course, and then reacts with the very alkaline concrete, and that's what allows it to embed these iron oxide salts into the concrete. So at first it pulls the iron oxide off the steel and then embeds it in the concrete. Another thing we do is we put vinegar in a jar. This is just regular white vinegar. Drop some steel wool in there, and then you can pour that on the floor. And that's what this is. And where it pools up, of course, you get a little darker color. The longer you leave it in there, the darker the iron oxide, the more concentrated the iron oxides are. Another thing we did was we just put steel wool on the ground and then poured vinegar on it every time we walk by. This, of course, is where we're pouring it. Our floors are not level, which we feel like really helped us out. We also did it in layers because you just get a lot more depth that way. Do small amounts in layers. You can see where they overlap. You just get a richer kind of look to it, a deeper look. This is again our steel. We move it frequently, or after 2 days we move it, so you get multiple lines. You'll see what that looks like in just a moment. Also, we pour on extra to allow the iron oxides to pool up. Again, another shot. This is the third coating, I think, we've put down. You can see remnants of the second two. This we experimented with muriatic acid also, which is rather potent. You need to know this is the real deal. It's a real acid. It's not diluted to 5% like vinegar or something. But it will pull stains back out of the concrete. It will also etch the surface of the concrete if you need it to be etched before you stain it. We chose not to do that. The stains were taken just fine without etching it. We did make sure there wasn't any oily residue on the top. Then we took, for our copper salts, we used concrete coatings, turquoise, which is muriatic acid essentially, or hydrochloric acid with copper salts. And we used a spray bottle and we misted it on. We poured it on in some places and we misted it on in others so that we get a gradient, so we didn't have these hard lines going, just down the middle. We also left our jar out in the middle. We discovered from the past that things like that give a cool, just a pattern on the floor. That's actually what started us on this, where the previous owner had left some water heaters and they had leaked and they had some round iron oxide rings on the concrete. That's what kind of clued us in that this iron oxide would stick to the concrete well and be hard to get up. So that's why we started experimenting with how to embed it in there ourselves and not take 20 years to do it. We also started mixing our colors here. You can see where we allow our greens to run into our reds. And there's our bottle where we just let it run underneath it, and you can see where it pulls up under the ridges of the bottom of the bottle and gives you those funky patterns, which we like. Again, this is the second or the third coat of the green. We sprayed it on enough that it ran in some places, and in other places we just poured it on, like right here, and let it run. And also in places we mixed the two together, of course, as you can see, and just generally experimented and stepped back and looked at it and thought, oh, we need a little more green here. Don't be afraid to let it take, this took probably a week and a half, just a little bit every day, and that just built it up over time. Here's the mostly finished product. We put water on it to see what it's going to look like. It doesn't give you the shine or the sheen of the finished product, but at least it'll give you the color saturation. And we weren't quite happy. We wanted a little more drama than we had going on, so we, after we cleaned it and let it dry, we decided to mix up some more iron oxide and or some vinegar and steel wool, and we let it set for about 5 or 6 days to get this super concentrated version, and then we put that on as a kind of as a highlight, and then we were happy with it. So once you have your color at the level you want, take a steel brush like this one from, or a wire brush from Harbor Freight. It's just about the right stiffness for almost any project we found, unless you're working with metal. Most steel brushes are used for working with metal, or they're soft, or they're brass. This is a nice in-between steel brush, works great for things like this. So just run it across some places where the iron oxide pools. It doesn't stick well, so you just need to run that steel brush over it to make sure everything is adhered to the concrete well. Pull up anything that isn't. Now, in the other unit, we had run lots of this green, this turquoise. In fact, we ran too much. All this we ran in turquoise. We didn't like it. It was too much green. So we took muriatic acid and a rag, and we kind of sponged all that color back up, or most of that color back up. In fact, we did it almost everywhere. We did it over here. We did it on our first stripes as well. And then we went back and poured the green again where we wanted green. And that, it didn't get all the color up with the muriatic acid, but it gave us this beautiful wash, which we'll show you in just a minute. Again, that's the brush we use. Once you're ready, wash the floor, and then, of course, vacuum it, wash it. Take dust rags and wash it, and then take a lint rag and go over it a final time. The more dirt you can get off of it, the better, of course. And actually, we wire brush. Sometimes we wire brush it. If the concrete's really dirty, we'll wire brush the whole thing, or take a sander, hook it up to the vacuum, and sand it just to get the dirt off the floor. Not because we need to open the pores in the concrete. You can see how the patterns of our steel tubing looks. Now this is in places where it was just burnished with a steel trowel. We really like that, and so we just epoxied it straight. This is the unfinished concrete, of course, and then the finished concrete. See the contrast there? We use lots of things to spread the epoxy. One of the best things we found is just a grout float. The problem with the grout float is if you press really hard, it will really make a super thin coat, which doesn't allow the epoxy to be very glossy, gives it kind of a matte finish. We didn't really care for that look, so in this case we actually went back and put a second coat on. But later we just used the grout float, and we just didn't press super hard, and that's just about right. Now you don't have to worry about getting a perfect finish, like it perfectly even. You don't need to use a trowel with notches in it to get it perfectly even. We found that's problematic unless you're going to put a lot of epoxy down. You just get ridges in it, and yeah, we think the uneven finish just adds to the character of the floor, and we don't have any problem with it. This is showing the difference between epoxy versus non-epoxy, just how much brighter it looks and more dramatic. Just so as you're doing your color, you kind of know what's going on. Another shot of that. Here's where our highlight was with the epoxy. Showing you that before we show you the whole floor. This is the area in the first unit where it had not been steel troweled, and we're actually pretty happy with it. The epoxy filled in most of the deeper holes, that took stain well because it hadn't been steel troweled, took the stain actually better than the steel troweled areas. And we're pretty happy. So the concrete was pretty flexible. This acid certainly adheres well to both troweled and untroweled concrete. And here's the finished product. The Unit 2 of our little boutique hotel. There's looking back towards the kitchen, of course. Some areas that are untroweled, and there's the area that is heavily. We didn't want to color the whole floor. We felt like that would be, or stain the whole floor. We felt like that would be too much stain and too much going on, especially because in some areas we already had these patterns where the old linoleum tile was down, and we really liked that. We also had these holes that we filled with black grout where the carpet tack strips left divot when we pulled those tack strips up. These white lines are just where the wall used to be, and they painted them and hadn't been very careful with their painting. We left all that because we liked the character. Again, some more divots from carpet tack strips. And in the shower, of course, we just ground the floor down to make it sloped to drain, and then that's where you get you that pebbly look. And we just epoxied all of that too. In fact, in the bathroom, we epoxied our walls, so the whole bathroom's waterproof. And then there's the finished product, which we're very happy with, and our guests love it. This is in the back bedroom where it was just steel trowel. One last shot of that unit. Maybe not the last shot. Here's the first unit we did. Again, in the foreground, you see where we pulled some of that stain back up. This is where the green stain was. We put muriatic acid down and pulled it back up. And all this over here is the same. This was all dark green or dark turquoise, and we pulled it back up. Like I said, in fact, we pulled all of this up and then went back and put this back down, and that gave us a nice gradient from the hard greens over to these washed greens. After that, we put some red iron oxide stains back over top of the green, and we're incredibly happy with how that one turned out. We feel like this one even more than our other one. This green wash, it's just very subtle. It's just enough green to bleed over into the rest of the floor without being too dramatic. And we love our steel wool where we put it down and squished it out. That's what this is. We left it down there for a long time. This is also steel wool, just less time. These are all kind of places where we put steel wool and then just let vinegar drain. In the blacks, we had we took a sample of ebony stain. That's from the same company, and it's a very fast acting stain, so we would put it down and then take some cardboard on edge and just move it around, so it didn't have time to become all the way black. We did leave it in some areas, let it become all the way black, but mostly we wanted to just move it around. And so as it became neutralized, as the acid became neutralized, you see we get this kind of a black wash in all of this area, and back in here just washed out where so it's just not hard lines. We don't like, in some areas, these hard lines like this red is fine, but we like it how there are variations in the color, and then how some of the areas have hard edges and then it washes out to nothing. Again, this was that picture you saw in the beginning of the original floor. All we did to tie this in just a little bit was we put some iron oxide stain, vinegar and iron oxide over in the corner. Like I said, we're very happy with how this turned out. When the sun hits it, especially, the gloss from the epoxy and the multiple layers of the colors give it lots of depth. You can see where we're getting a reflection here in the foreground corner of the couch. Really, when the sun hits it, it's just incredible. We haven't been able to get a picture of it. We're not that great of photographers. We're architects, not photographers, but hey, if you want to come see it in person, we'd love to have you. It's, like I said, Cedar Hill in Charleston, West Virginia.